Avon, which is an IPP. Just to give you a bit of context on these open cycle gas turbines, or OCGTs for short, they consume each about 1,802 litres of diesel per minute. With 9 units in operation, therefore, we use about 17,000 litres of diesel per minute. And that is why we are constrained with logistics. These diesel units are not intended to run at high load factors. They are intended to run at a load factor certainly below 5%, but due to generation constraints, we currently have these units operating in order to make up for the shortfall in generation. We have a number of units that are at risk, at high risk this morning. Our Duva 1, which has still that high pressure heater leak that we referred to yesterday. That's about 575 megawatts at risk. And then a boiler tube leak at Kriel, about 120 megawatts. So all in all, just under 900 megawatts at risk of an immediate trip. That risk, we believe, is manageable given the healthy state of our reserves. Our dams are still looking very good, so we've utilized our overnight excess generation capacity to augment our dams, and our diesel capacity is also looking solid at the moment. So at this point in time, the outlook for the weekend is good. We don't see any prospect for load shedding over the weekend. Of course, we will apprise you of what is happening as soon as the situation changes. We will continue with system updates whenever there is a need for us to inform the South African public proactively of what is going on. Again, we wish to appeal to you to use electricity sparingly. It really does make a difference, and every kilowatt that you save by not boiling too much water, by turning down your geyser, by using your swimming pool pump less, by switching off unnecessary lights, really does make a difference. Here at Megawatt Park, we're also changing our approach to electricity consumption. We are switching off our air conditioning during off-peak times. We're switching it off earlier than normally used to be the case. So we are trying to lead by example in order to make sure that we too play our part when it comes to being electricity wise. One of the questions that I have been getting is, why are we subject to load shedding in summer when ambient temperatures are higher and the overall demand is in fact lower than it is during winter? There are a couple of reasons for that, and I think it's maybe interesting for the public out there to understand that. The first is that we schedule more maintenance during the summer months, precisely in order to make available additional capacity during winter when demand is higher. Secondly, the profile of demand during winter is significantly different. We have a very pronounced evening peak, which is quite short, whereas in summer you find that there is a sustained high offtake on the demand on the system, and that results in the units having to run harder for longer, and given the lack of reliability of our system, that then tends to expose some of our units to more challenges than they would otherwise have faced. The final issue, of course, relates to the ambient temperatures being higher, and that leads to our cooling water systems, which, as we explained in a previous briefing, have not been adequately maintained, that these cooling water systems do not function as well as they should, and that then leads to vacuum load losses on our turbines, and that constrains our ability to produce as much electricity from those units as we would like to. We are catching up on that maintenance, but because we have to schedule the maintenance to coincide with regular scheduled outages, this means that there's a period of about 3 to 4 years before all of that backlog of maintenance will have been eradicated. So with that, Sikonati, I am going to pause, hand back to you, and open up the floor to any questions as moderated by you.
Thank you, Andre. Some of our colleagues in the media seem to not be able to come in through the link. But you spoke about the weekend and indeed today. Any idea what next week will look like, the early part of next week at least?
At this point in time, Sikonati, the prognosis is good. We have a number of units that are coming back as planned. I attended our system meeting this morning at 5 o'clock, and I can give the assurance that our power station managers are working very hard with their teams in order to bring back those megawatts that are on outage. Of course, some challenges do remain. These are complex units, very large units, difficult to operate. And we've spoken a lot about various constraints that we have in terms of procurement and so forth, but we will take appropriate steps to ensure that we can relieve that. So the outlook for next week at this point in time is quite positive. Thanks, Sikonati.
Thanks, Andre. We have a question from Terence Creamer of Engineering News. What is your response to Minister Enoch Godongwana's suggestion that Eskom should sell coal power stations to help address your legacy debt? Question number 2. There are some concerns being expressed about diesel shortages nationally owing to Eskom's high consumption currently. What is your intelligence on the supply-demand balance and the prospect of stockouts at petrol stations? You want to take those, Andre?
Yep, thanks, Sikonati. So on the first one, Terence, at this stage, we have no comment. This is a shareholder matter, a policy matter, and I suggest that you direct any questions in that regard to the government and to Minister Godongwana, who will no doubt be in a better position to give you a response to that. As far as diesel is concerned, yes, South Africa as a country is increasingly short of refining capacity, and we are dependent on imports. Clearly, we have a big diesel consumption, as I've indicated. With regard to the impact on the availability of diesel for retail customers, we as Eskom are not close enough to that. That's not part of our sphere of operations, and I would suggest that you contact SABC, which will be able to give you information on diesel availability at retail service stations.
Thank you, Andre. We do not have any further questions. I can, of course, understand we have been keeping the people of South Africa very busy the past 2 weeks and indeed did our best to inform them. There you go. Mariam Issa has got her hand up. Mariam, please unmute yourself. My colleagues have unmuted you, and please give us your question.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this question, okay, it's a bit fuzzy. It relates to comments. There have been comments made about sabotage, petty sabotage at some of the plants. And I just wondered whether you can give us an idea of how much impact this has had on your operations, how much impact it's had.
Mariam, thank you. Please do lower your hand. Andre, before you answer that question, there is another one from Thando Maego of Business Day. Please give an update on the unbundling process. Is Eskom on track to meet the December deadline to unbundle the transmission unit by December? Thank you.
Thank you, Siganati. Thank you, Miriam. It's very often rather difficult to distinguish between negligence and sabotage. I'm quite reluctant to play the sabotage card. It is a phrase that is redolent with all sorts of historical connotations. So I don't want to claim that there is widespread sabotage. From time to time, we do have incidents of cable theft at our power stations. This seems to be more closely related to common criminality than acts of sabotage. And then we have had incidents of, for example, valves being opened to drain boilers of demineralized water. And this has a significant impact on our ability to bring back units to service. Whether or not that is through malice or incompetence is a matter that we investigate in every instance. We have increasingly stepped up our surveillance activities at our power stations. We these days employ drones equipped with infrared cameras to patrol our power stations at night. And we have apprehended a number of cable thieves around our power stations at Kendal and Tutuka in particular. We've had some significant successes there. We've also installed so-called intelligent cameras that are able to, using artificial intelligence, detect if there are unwarranted activities taking place. It can even be programmed, or it can even teach itself to pick up somebody who's smoking in an area where he or she shouldn't be smoking. And this is giving us much better control as we roll out these surveillance systems. So long answer, Miriam, but I think to claim widespread sabotage in the strict sense of the word is not substantiated by the facts. Tandu, as far as unbundling is concerned, from an Eskom perspective, we are on track to meet all of the Eskom targets for the legal separation of our transmission business by the end of the year, so by the 31st of December. We have, as I think I referred to in a previous media briefing during the past week, we have fully functionally separated the transmission business. We have established a legal entity. We have appointed directors pro tem who are currently minding the shop while we await the appointment of permanent directors to the National Transmission Company of South Africa, as this entity is known. We have also put in place measures to start trading electricity between generation and distribution using the facility of the transmission system and market operators. So that is in place. The issues that are still outstanding relate to the granting of a transmission license to the new entity. This license must be granted, or has to be granted, by NERSA, and it is currently allocated to Eskom Holdings SOC. So there is a certain regulatory process that needs to be followed in order to award that license. We are currently looking at legal options to still effect on a de facto basis the legal separation, even if on a de jure basis we are not quite there yet. An example would be if you buy a house and you take occupation of the house, even though it's not yet registered in your name, you can already start behaving like an owner and making the improvements that you want to. These matters can be contractually arranged, and similarly, we are exploring options to do something similar. Of course, it's not quite as easy as buying a house. There's far less legal precedent for it, but we are taking some really sound legal advice to help us. The other matter that we are dependent on is an amendment to the Electricity Regulation Act. This amendment, we understand, has been drafted. It will be submitted to Cabinet, and thereafter it has to go through the parliamentary process. This could take 12 to 18 months, depending on how quickly it goes through the process before it is submitted to the state president to assent to the amendment bill and turn it into an act. So the opportunity, I think, is for us again to look at what options do we have, considering that the National Transmission Company of South Africa will still be a wholly owned subsidiary of Eskom Holdings SOC. So we can keep this rather in the family and still enable us to start implementing the practical elements of legal separation. So done a long and complicated answer to a short question, but unfortunately this is a long and complicated process that we are in.
Andre, let's try summarize the long and complicated answer, if you will. One, Eskom's own internal processes have been are complete, and we are indeed in place. For December, the company operates separately now and contracts with the other divisions. Am I correct? That's what you're saying? What is left is outside of Eskom's control, and those include the regulatory process plus the legislative or parliament process, which will should pass or make some amendments to law to make this a standalone company. Is that what you are saying?
That is correct. So from an Eskom perspective, we are doing everything that we can to make sure that we are ready to implement legal separation by the end of this year. If there are certain matters that are still outstanding at that date, and I've indicated that there are some regulatory and legislative matters, then we are exploring what legal workarounds there are. Obviously doing so lawfully and with very sound legal advice and with the full consent of our shareholder to enable us to move forward with the legal separation process as best we can, given the constraints of the external environment.
Thank you. The next question, I do not see any hands. I should take this to be amongst the last of questions. It comes from Teresa Smith. Teresa has not identified, she's from ESI Africa. When it comes to the terms and conditions of the Just Energy Transition Partnership, what are your goals? Are you aiming for grants and concession funding or technical support? And is there any estimated, the ETA, I would think that's estimated time of arrival on when you will have a plan in place? And she is referring, of course, to the COP26 deal that was announced a week ago. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. Where we are with the COP26 announcement is that was a political announcement between a number of governments, as well as the European Union and, of course, the South African government, to make available 131 billion rand in concessional funding to South Africa for the acceleration of the decarbonisation of our economy, with Eskom expected to take the lion's share of that allocation. We now need to engage with the lender group and put in place enabling agreements with those lenders so that we as a country, first of all, and then secondly, as Eskom, we can access this funding. These will be loans, so they will need to be repaid, albeit at highly concessional interest rates. So it's very, very cheap money that we can access, subject, of course, to meeting certain decarbonisation commitments, and we will be doing so over the coming months. The presidency is in charge of a technical task group that is also assisted by the Department of Fishery, Forestry and the Environment, and under the leadership of Minister Barbara Creasy, they are going to put in place this enabling framework agreement that will then allow Eskom to draw down. So there's a number of months ahead of further negotiation and discussion to bed all of this down. The political intent is quite clear. We now need to translate this into formal agreements. I may just add that in addition to the $8.5 billion committed to at COP, we are already receiving some very significant grant financing from a number of countries, in particular from France and also from Germany. This is intended to assist us with a variety of just transition projects, which we've already commenced, and this is not dependent on the process that I've just referred to, and the amounts are quite significant, runs into the billions of rands that have been made available to us on a grant basis. Grant funding, of course, means that we don't need to repay it, but ultimately we cannot invest the capital required to facilitate the just energy transition without accessing additional concessional debt. Siganati, over to you.
Thank you, Andre. The question from Bongi Mukhale, she has not told us where she is from. We'll close with Terence Creamer's question. This is Bongi Mukhale. Can we not be on stage 1 until maintenance of fixing is finished instead of this stage 2 upwards crisis response? Bongi is pleading for a constant stage 1 rather than jumping to other stages. Wallace Foslo, I know you have been on the call for much longer than all of us. That question you are asking about the government planning on selling power stations has already been answered. And the answer is that's a policy decision, and the government itself is most able to comment on that. It's a shareholder matter. Andre, can you answer the question on can we just stay on stage 1? And Mariam Issa has followed up with another question. Can you tell us how much grant financing you are already receiving, which was just mentioned? Again, that relates to Teresa Smith's question. Thank you. You are muted, Andre.
All right, thank you, Sikanati. Bongi, we would prefer not to implement constant load shedding. We think that is highly disruptive to the economy, and we therefore believe that as we complete our maintenance programs and as we bring units back, that we will be in a better situation to keep a reliable and available supply of electricity on the grid. Of course, again, we have to stress that there is the shortfall of about 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts on the grid that will give us adequate headroom to conduct our maintenance and to ensure that we can have enough space to carry out the backlog or to catch up with the backlog that has arisen. So, Bongi, no, at this point in time, we don't anticipate or envisage a continuous series of load shedding to be in place. Right, I think then we should move over to Miriam's question. I'm just checking my numbers here, Miriam, if you don't mind. So let's go to Terence's question while we verify. So the key lessons that we have drawn from this period of load shedding in terms of changes in the way that we manage and communicate Terence, yes, I think we really want to step up our transparency with the South African public. We want to be more proactive so that when we anticipate that there could be pressure on the system, we will commence again with regular daily briefings so that people are aware of the risks that are in the system, and that they can also proactively start to adjust to the extent possible their consumption in order to assist us. And we definitely believe that there is value in being as open and as transparent as possible. Eskom is a complex beast, and the more that we inform people of these complexities and the various issues that could potentially affect the availability of electricity, I think the better and the more understanding there will be, frustrating though load shedding is for people of South Africa. Right. From COP26, Miriam, we have so far got an amount of 25 million. This is what we have available right now, but there are other funds available. We can certainly engage with you outside of the meeting and give you a more comprehensive reconciliation on what we've got from whom, so that it's out in the open and there are no secrets there of how the money is allocated. From time to time, of course, the developmental financing institutions make available these amounts through media releases, but maybe there's value in just publishing a reconciliation of what we've got and what we still want to access. Thanks, Ikonati.
Andre, that's 25 million rand in grant funding, am I correct?
Correct, Ikonati. So that's money without having to be repaid.
Thank you. At this point, I see no further hands, and we have just closed the chat. Colleagues, this is the last daily briefing during this period of load shedding. We, as Andre has said, we will make sure to be a lot more accessible through these kinds of briefings whenever there is a reason to communicate broadly to the public and to the whole country. Any closing remarks, Andre de Ruyter?
No, again, thanks to everybody for attending these meetings. We really appreciate your interest. I am going to advertise Sikonati's services. He is available for inquiries and interviews. And if there are any particular questions that you wish to ask, please work through our media desk, and we'll try and respond as best we can. So, colleagues, with that, I think let me wish you a very good weekend, and please remember to use electricity wisely. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. This is the end. Goodbye.
All right. All right, that was a live briefing. Eskom giving us a state of play with regards to the electricity supply. So looking good so far in terms of the weekend. The CEO, Andre de Ruyter, saying that the outlook for the weekend looks good. Also giving us some indication in terms of the week ahead looking good as well. So we shall see. If anything changes, we will bring that to you live right here on SABC News Channel. I need to go straight now to KwaZulu-Natal. We're talking